everyone, and welcome to this session titled Transformed by India. And I have the privilege and the honor to be speaking to two illustrious personalities. I will briefly introduce them. Diana Mickevičienė is the ambassador of the Republic of Lithuania to the Republic of India. She is a career diplomat with over 30 years experience and was the ambassador of Lithuania to China from 2020 to 22. She has a BA in philosophy and MA in history of culture and social anthropology and a diploma in international relations, and taught South Asian history at Vilnius University. She has published extensively on classical Indian dance and India-Lithuania historical relations, and a book, All of India's, published in 2011, which we will be discussing today. She is fluent in English, French, Russian, and is familiar with Hindi, Spanish, Mandarin, and Sanskrit. So that's makes her truly multilingual. I also have with me Stephen Huyler, art historian, cultural anthropologist, photographer, and author. His life has been dedicated to exploring, surveying, preserving, and celebrating India's rich artistic and cultural heritage. For 50 years, he has traveled through Indian villages for an average of 4 months each year. And his 7 books, including Transformed by India, a life just recently published in 2024. Maybe I was one of the first to purchase it today. 2025, 3 days ago, yes. So it's available in the stalls, and I would really urge you to go and have a look at the book. It invokes an India rarely seen by outsiders and unknown to many Indians today. He has been a consultant, guest curator for more than 25 major museum exhibitions of Indian art, with solo exhibitions at the Smithsonian, the Asian Art Museum, San Francisco, and the Kodak Center for Creative Imaging. So, welcome both of you, Stephen, Ambassador Diana. So, India can be a notoriously difficult country to navigate for outsiders and foreigners. So, there is this image of a complex country which is ridden with many issues: urban-rural divide, caste issues, language. We have more than 700 languages, cultures, religions, all juxtaposed with each other, and a million gods to add to the list. So there is also the other side of India, which is the image of India as an emerging technology, emerging power, economic power, and with ease of access to technology, even the smallest shopkeeper today has access to, he can take payments through his cell phone, GPay, etc. So it can be a very complex scenario for somebody who has just arrived in India from outside. And I remember reading somewhere, either you love India or you hate it. There is no midway between the two. But when the journey is well prepared, when the travelers are equipped with the necessary knowledge and bring with them a certain sensitivity, empathy, and a self-awareness of who they are and where they come from, then this gaze of the outsider, within quotes, with its critical views, appreciative comments, evaluative comments, can truly bring insights which are not always visible to us as Indians. And I think that is what we can come to appreciate in the books written by Ambassador Diana and by Stephen Huyler. So for this reason, I feel that I think it's going to be a eye-opening kind of our talk, maybe, with insights, some of it which surprised me also when I read. So let's get right into it. So the introductions are done, so we can, and Stephen has been spending like 50 years more than 50 years in India, coming to India for a few months each year. And from what I have read, he has extensively documented Indian art and craft, and also helped at a time when Indians themselves were not really looking inwards. So the 1970s was a time where we were looking out and trying to match up to the rest of the world, and trying to become the developed as an economy. So the inward gaze was not so much present among Indians. And Ambassador Diana has visited India as a student, and her book is based on her observations as a student, but it has also gone through 3 editions. So there is a lot of, maybe we will find out if her views have evolved. So India is actually not new to Lithuania. It surprised me also to know that Lithuanians have been coming to India since the 16th century. So maybe not as much in great numbers as others, as the British or the French or the Portuguese, but regularly there have been Lithuanians who have visited India and who have documented it. And maybe it may come as a surprise to some, but not everyone, that one of Mahatma Gandhi's a friend of his was a Lithuanian, Herman Kallenbach, whom he befriended in South Africa, and with whom he stayed in correspondence for a good part of his life. So there are many links, and of course, among all the Indo-European languages, Lithuanian is the closest to Sanskrit. It has many links with Sanskrit. So actually, it's not really. So my first question to Ambassador Diana is: so are these the reasons why you were attracted to India in the first place? And in your book, I read a sentence: I fell ill with India from a young age. So let us begin with this most obvious question. So what drew you to India among all the countries that you could have visited in the wide world, and what made you come back again?
Thank you for the introduction. It's so nice to be with you on this podium. What drew me to India was a very banal thing. I was probably 12 and I watched an Indian movie, very simple. But it was Umrao-Jan, and I still like it, and I think it's a beautiful movie which really projects, so much of good about India and Indian culture and history. But if you think, back, it's probably not a reason, it's a trigger which attracted the attention of a 12-year-old, and I was so fascinated by the sheer aesthetic beauty of everything I saw. But what actually drew me to India was the intrigue that I read a bit later. I started watching other Indian movies because I was growing up in Soviet Union, and movies were the only thing available about India. You would not, find anything more than that. And then I read a damning critique of one of the Lithuanian movie critics who said that Indian movies and real India have nothing in common. That was a damning statement which intrigued me down to the core, and I said, so what the hell is real India? So I should, and then I started really reading, getting whatever I could lay my hands on. And I still can't say what exactly draws me to India, because I've been so grown together with India that it's been with me ever since. It's my second home. It's a country I know best after my native country. And the reasons you mentioned, the depth of civilization, linguistic connection between, and some cultural connections between ancient Lithuanians and Vedic Indians, obviously, are a very important element. And I would say also, I think, our common experiences in history, because we have also been colonized, and our cultural properties have also been plundered. We have been denied of our identity, and when I speak to Indians about the post-colonial experience, is very, very similar. We have experienced very similar. So, it's a very long answer, and it's not a conclusive answer. I think I'm still looking for the right one.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Stephen, You grew up in California, Ohio, and your first interest, as I read in the book, was to document Native American art, folk art. But suddenly we find that you're crossing the Indo-Pakistan border on a cycle rickshaw with the rider sitting at the back, and on your 20th birthday, on the eve of your 20th birthday. So can you explain how this happened, how the shift occurred from Native American to Indian?
I'm interested in indigenous or the art of the people. That's what draws me. The things that are made by people and used by people and what their meaning is. And I was introduced at a very young age to Native Americans. But I also lived 150 or 200 meters from the Indian philosopher Krishnamurti, Jiddu Krishnamurti. And I knew him as a little boy. And one of his best friends was an American artist named Beatrice Wood. And Beatrice Wood's closest friend was Kamala Devi Chattapai. So Kamala Devi and her other best friend, Rukmini Devi Arandel, invited me to India when I was 18. I arrived, I came overland when I was 19, and you're right, on my 20th birthday, bicycled across the Pakistani-Indian border just before war was declared in a bicycle rickshaw. And I was through Kamala Devi ji. She opened doors for me that are unparalleled. I really believe unparalleled. I was given Kamala Devi, this young whippersnapper. I was nothing. But somehow, through these connections, she might have seen something, but at least her generosity was such that she wrote personal letters. I was planning to travel. I had studied India already in preparation for this trip at university. Studied Indian art and history and religion, etc. So I came somewhat prepared. And I knew that I wanted to spend 7 months traveling in India by third-class train and bus. And she gave me letters of introduction that she wrote by, typed but signed, wrote by herself, to a dozen, more than dozens, many dozens of people who were the leaders, the freedom fighters who had worked with her, and the women primarily who had set up the crafts cooperatives anywhere I chose to go. And those women, those families invited me to stay with them. So how could I not, Uma, do the work that I do? I do the work I do because I was given so much at an early age, and the doors that opened for me of the thoughtfulness, the kindness, the generosity of people. And it took me a while to understand what it was I was seeing. Of course, I was an American with an American sensibility. But the difference possibly was that I am someone who can easily be quiet. You might not know it to hear me now, but I can easily be quiet and just allow life to go around and observe.
So, yes, that was another thing. You know, you use these words that I'm quiet, I'm observant, and I also just went through the book very quickly, and the word learned, I learned, I imbibed. So these are words which come again and again in your book and shows your approach also. But I was also wondering, you were introduced at such a young age to literally the elite of the Indian cultural scene, and you met a lot of high-profile individuals. And how did you keep yourself grounded and focused on your task? I mean, you could have so easily gone, the comfortable way.
I was not interested in the comfort, but what I was interested in was feeling the pulse of the people. I was interested in trying to understand who are the common women and men of India. Who are the people that populate India? What are their voices? Who are they? and I tried to learn to listen to that, and to observe it, and to understand it. And as I said, I'd already studied for a couple of years Indian history and religion and art history and sociology. So I had a certain knowledge, but that knowledge was academic, and I was trying to give it practicality. I was trying to allow myself to listen to the real voices, not the voices of academic interpretation, but the voices of the people. Who are they? What do they have to say? And I found everywhere that I went in America, and in the I studied in England too, in the UK, I found that people misunderstood. They felt that the people that I met in India, and you might have found that too, that they interpreted it as something to look at as victims. While as I have never seen in India, people are not victims. People are self-empowered, strong, capable people. Even the people who are in oppressive conditions don't consider themselves victims. That is very different in the West, where people in our slums are dejected. In India, the people who are living in the villages or living in the Mumbai slums where I've worked, or other urban slums or whatever, most of them still have a vitality of life. They still want to find ways to improve their lives. And those are the voices that I've tried to give across to Westerners, but also to Indians, because Indians need to know. You need to know what a wonderful and fascinating and multilateral, layered culture you have.
Yeah, I think as one grows, you realize that one knows less and less about one's country, and the more you read what others have written, that also helps you to understand your own culture. So I would like to take the same question across to you, Ambassador Diana. So how did you feel being in the Indian society, like Stephen has just mentioned? So what were your interactions like with the common Indian people? And like we said just now, your book is in the 3rd edition. So are there any thoughts about Indian society which has evolved over the years for you?
Well, I can very much relate to what Stephen has just said, even though my entry was a little different. I was 22 and I came here to study, to do a short course on international relations at the Foreign Service Institute of India. So it was an India-sponsored, course. And for me, it was a very first chance to visit India, which just a few years ago would have been, equal to a trip to the moon, probably. I was growing up in Soviet Union, so traveling abroad was just simply not possible, except in a few very supervised, situations. So I have met people in Lithuania who had been to India, and to me they were like, wow. But then when you speak from today's perspective, they're all telling how there would be like a cultural group, they will always be followed, there would be a KGB person in the group who would not allow them to really go and speak to the people. So this was how you could travel. And to meet in India and in Lithuania was like almost impossible. So I came with that, very big eyes. It was my very first flight I took to India. So India was the world to me, I have to also say. And then I had this obsession with this real India, which I mentioned. What was this real India? And I really, I'm probably still, on my way to find the answer. But when I came, my first time, then several years ago, I came after the first trip in '98, I came to study Indian art, where I was completely on my own. I was totally alone, single, young woman in Delhi, which, has certain challenges also. Many women would know what it means, especially in the north of India. But this real India was something I was looking for. And initially I thought I really had to go to the street, to wherever, path takes me, slum, whatever area, and, traveling on buses and trains. And I really felt fascinated, with that, simple people. meeting them, I already had a rudimentary knowledge of Hindi, so I could have a simple conversation. I think my best memories are in fact from the traveling in the Himalayas, in Himachal Pradesh, on a simple night bus, ordinary bus, which was the cheapest overnight trips. And these people would be poor normally, would be taking that sort of bus, but they would drag me out of the bus, they would sit me at the dhaba, they would feed me, they would give me chai, they would, the conversations. And later, when I could afford a better bus, this would not happen. Because, their people are, they respect each other's privacy, they don't interfere, so you just take a bus, you hardly speak, So yes, I agree that there was so much of beauty and simplicity and dignity in the people I met that it remains to me the most fascinating thing. But it took me a while to start meeting the intellectual elites. I met them later, and I keep on meeting them, and I'm again fascinated by the depth of education, thoughts, insights, and even the very wide horizon, knowledge about the wider world. But I think since I sort of grew up with India, it influenced me so much that I was also changing. And if you ask me now, the third edition is just out of my book. I had slightly adjusted the commentary part. So my book is partly my diary and then commentaries, which I wrote much later, 10 years after my travels in question. But I decided not to touch the diary because to me it's a very clear memory of my own 25-year-old, because I have also changed. I have also grown a lot. Of course, India has changed so much. But I think it's a bit of a memento to my own, or okay, not personally, but an individual's growth in the country, which has become the first real abroad, the first real encounter with a huge civilization which has produced so much beauty and at the same so much of complexity.
So one of the themes which both of you have touched upon, but of course in different ways, is the connection with Indian spirituality. You have both, I noticed, distinguished between the grand narratives of Hinduism with all its religious texts and the rituals and all, but you have focused on the everyday lived religious aspects of Hinduism, and that I found very interesting that both of you have, in your own way, touched upon that. So I would like Ambassador Diana first to talk about how she perceived this spirituality, because India is known for that. Sometimes it could also be a stereotype for many Indians also. So how did you perceive this? And you have visited Tirupati, so there's a very exciting chapter in her book on how she went and got darshan of Lord Venkateshwara. So I found that very interesting. So anyway, so how do you perceive this spiritual element, and how did you came with one image, and how did you reconcile it with what you were seeing in India?
This would also be a complex answer because, I came, and many of, at least Lithuanians for sure, come with a very idealized idea of Indian spirituality. So we look at every Indian as someone like almost a guru, and then, the first time you were cheated by a rickshaw driver, this might sort of take a hit, that ideal image, or look, okay, you see poverty, you see other things you might not really like perhaps, right? How to reconcile this, what you already know and what you continue to observe, with some things which you think, are not exactly to your writing. But what I was very interested in, and I did not really, I have to say, I did not look for any spiritual leader or salvation or peace. I was, on the contrary, very eager to experience the roughest moments. As I said, I walked on foot. I didn't take a rickshaw drive across it, but probably it's not even possible nowadays. You can't cross the border like this. But I would make a point to go to temples, to places of worship, and observe people from very close up, wherever I would be allowed, because in many places as a non-Hindu you are not allowed. And I've questioned and quizzed all my friends about what they feel, what they put into the daily ritual and perform. So my definition of puja and darshan is from the people's accounts, not from scriptures basically. And then I was very confident enough to go, and I would of course always go in front of the deity if I visit a temple, because I got from them that very basic understanding from the common man's perspective. What is it that they believe and what they do, what they think they do right now when they are performing something. So Tirupati was, of course, something I really wanted to do, and it was not an easy thing because I did not know there were such queues where you had to book your time. I just landed up there on a bus. I had somebody to help me who was a boy from Tirupati down, there, who didn't speak English, and his Hindi was also so, even worse than mine. So we had a very, not an easy conversation. But then I also felt that I had to go and bow in front of the deity because that's what I came for. It became sort of a pilgrimage. But then I was also somewhat shocked to see, to me it was the first revelation that your queue's length depends on the money you got paid. And I was given that mid-range ticket, which actually cost quite a lot to me. I was on a student budget and I had a boy with me for whom I also had to pay. So it was a sum for me. But then the people who didn't pay or paid very little, they had to queue for 2 days. We queued only for 4 hours. And in these cages queuing to see the deity, to do the darshan, I had so many reflections of why is it so that the rich man has a fast access, a fast track, and that even in religion, in spirituality, these things are there. So it was in Tirupati where I had my very first thoughts. And then in fact what you see in the wider world is also that a lot of Indian spirituality is for sale. So, that's what my Indian friends told me. So yes, yes and no. There are things that you enjoy and accept and rebel in, and there are things that you might have a second thought about it. So I've always been oscillating between the two, in India, and I'm not shy to speak about it because I think the complexity of India is there in these sometimes contradictions, and idealizing something is probably not the right thing to do.
I think Indians also grapple to a certain extent with questions, how does one reconcile between the two, like being religious or spiritual and being very, very materialistic at the same time, which is actually growing. So, Stephen, you have spoken of a very deep spiritual connection that you have had, and in fact, in one of the chapters you speak of this ritual you attended for goddess Chandi in West Bengal, and where you had a transcendental moment and you felt that you have crossed you from a mere participant you have become an observer. No, I'm sorry, from a mere observer you have actually become a participant in the ritual. So what does it mean to you, this, how do you reconcile the various aspects of spirituality, and what have you gained from this interaction, and how did you, as a document, you have documented art. So how did you link that with your work as a researcher on documenting art? The two are linked, I think, to a certain extent.
So it was those introductions to Kamala Devi and the homes in which I stayed, where the pujas were taking place daily, where the women were the caretakers of the family, were the ones who maintained the puja room, or could be just, if it was a very poor family, it could just be a small niche or even a shelf. But it was watching those rituals that first began to open my mind to something other than what I was raised with, which was Christianity and going to a church. But we didn't have images in the home, and we didn't I was a Protestant, so we didn't even have a cross that we prayed to in that way, except in the church. So to watch that, to witness that, was for me profound. But I didn't understand it. And you're quite correct. It took me a long time, years, and I became fascinated with shrines. And so I have documented thousands, quite literally thousands, of rural shrines in India, and temples, but shrines that are along the roadside or at the edge of the village that house the Gramadevta, that is the soul of that village, and then the home is the Kuladevta. And so I have documented that, but it still was documenting that until I was at that one tree shrine it was actually in Odisha, not in West Bengal, where the Gramadevta, the deity that is that community, as inseparable from that community. I was kindly offered that I could be present and witness the invocation of Chandi into the change, into the spirit of the Gramadevta in the embodiment of a sacred tree, and in Murti that was part of it. And I was just watching it, and actually I was allowed to photograph, it was outside, and they allowed me to photograph, and I was photographing, but I did photograph, but as it happened, this huge energy, this gigantic strength pervaded the whole area, and I was so surprised. I had no idea that would happen. And here was this man who was, I was a man at that point, but that was raised as a Christian, that suddenly, I'd always admired Hinduism, but suddenly I was in the presence of the phenomenal power of the goddess. And how could I not be affected by that? I was deeply affected. And so I then began to try to give access to others to that experience, not through preaching, I've never been drawn to go to a guru or to follow a certain practice. I am a sort of one-on-one type of person. But I then was asked by our National Museum in America, the Smithsonian, to create an exhibition on Hinduism. And I said, I can only do that if you allow me to have the images dressed and adorned. So we brought in purohits and pujaris, and the images, the bronze images and the stone images were dressed and adorned. And there were pujas made. And then we could have it. And actually it was very powerful. There in Washington, just half a mile from the Capitol, were these murti that were vibrant because they had been invoked. And so I then created other exhibitions that could show that around the United States and in Britain, and actually it came to India, surprisingly, but it was a little odd. But, and I see a gentleman who is a Sikh in the Gurdwaras, the way in which the Holy Granth is worshipped, the strength and power of that. My first day in India, my 20th birthday, was in the Golden Temple. And I write about that in my book, and the strength of that, but I didn't even understand what it was I was experiencing until, it's the same really in every shrine, whether it is Hindu, if it is Jain, if it is Sikh, or if it is actually Muslim. There are many where the strength and power and the sense of reverence, the sense of which we may have in the West, but it's so often lost. That sense of being in the presence of the divine and shedding one's whatever, in order to be present. That is something that moves me as deeply as anything, and which I try to convey.
Yeah, I mean, I think that comes across very, very strongly in your book, and that kind of parallels the practical work you were also doing at the same time. So, Stephen has actually recorded the terracotta votive horses or animals which are kept in front of shrines in rural Tamil Nadu to this day.
Actually, in 14 states, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Okay, yeah. So you were one of the first to bring it to the light of the public and show its importance to Indians also, I guess, at the same time. So there is also a very practical, very methodical documentation of, I mean, very, very thorough bit of research going on parallelly, which you have described it so beautifully in such accessible and beautiful prose. And it was a real treat to read that. In fact, if we have time, we can also discuss your exhibitions, but let us see if we have the time to do it. So another common aspect I found in notes where you have spoken about Indian women. So just now you said that Indians don't feel like they are victims even though they are oppressed. But you have also specifically spoken about women in India. Ambassador Diana, you have spoken about the challenges which are faced by Indian women, their place in society. And in fact, one thing which really struck me was on your visit to Hyderabad the first time, and you were going through Old City, and you say that it was fully crowded, and I was like, you know, people were jostling, but I felt safer here than I did in the markets of Delhi. So that was something which really struck me. So, yeah, so how did you perceive this? I mean, how do you look at, and then we will move on to Steve.
Yes, and I described that little Johnson we had. I was buying bangles, you know, in the old bazaar. And, well, as usually is, foreigners are asked to pay a little more. But since I spoke Hindi, I started bargaining, and there was this group of women, black-clad women, Muslim women, who solidarized with me so much. They stood and, you know, they laughed at the guy who wanted to overcharge me, and I really felt that women's solidarity in that crowd, you know. So we had a good laughter, and the poor salesman had to reduce the price to make it to the local price, so to say. But so it's an anecdotal situation about how women actually support each other, because yes, the street is not really women's space, especially in the north. South is a little, actually much better for a solo traveler. I've definitely experienced it. But what I also described is a very funny situation. I met again a young Muslim woman in Qutub Shah Tombs. She was sitting there. She came to speak to me, and then she said, "This is my boyfriend, I'm going to marry him." And there is this very, lanky young shy boy whom he dragged from behind the tomb to introduce me to. She was so outspoken and so confident. This boyfriend of hers was so much like, under her. So I felt that it's like a very, it really reflects that it's not like black and white. You know, women are extremely strong and confident, and what they have to go through demands of them the double strength, the double quality of work that they do, which is actually quite universal. I mean, it's not really to India, but Indian women are amazingly strong, and they, especially their own intra-solidarity, which helps them a lot, you know. So I'm a big admirer of a woman in India, because I know of her challenges, but I also feel that there is a bit of a dichotomy in worshipping a deity, but imposing certain, preconditions on women's functioning, which is one of the, contradictions that you see in this culture. But yes, I really admired how women are able to achieve heights, and how things are also changing. Speaking about this to so many men, and I see that, men are the best supporters of that change, because I think it's really good for everyone that women prosper and are equal and contribute to society also economically.
Yeah. So, Stephen, you had a very intimate connection with women. You said that you were mentored by women in India. But you have also, I think, highlighted the issue of women's art. So, the sacred, the columns, and you have done a lot of work on that. So can you just
Yes,
talk
really,
about that?
that was my first project, was on kolam. And my first year, we're on kolam and on terracotta in Tamil Nadu. But I have written 3 books about women's identity in India. And for me, as with Diana, because I know it's true for you too, we've talked before this, that the art is a key. It's a way in which one can understand something more. And so I have been looking at the art, the women's art. The art, when I began, and we're talking about 50 years ago, was not documented except by what I was doing. Now there are many people that are doing this kind of work, and that's wonderful. I don't need to do it really, but the documentation of these arts, whether it's on the ground in the kolam or the alpono or the rangoli or rangali, but also on the walls in different areas, like in Odisha or in Rajasthan or in UP or in Bihar or in Western Rajasthan or Eastern Rajasthan. It's different in every area, and the women express themselves graphically. That is a extension of the sacred, but it's ephemeral, so it's made for one moment only. As a foreigner, as an outsider, the idea that you could spend as much time in making something that is so beautiful and so fragile, and you know that it won't last, and it doesn't matter, and you don't need to sign it. That whole concept of lack of ego in the way that artists have ego. People have ego, of course, but there's a question of this is mine and I will be there for posterity, is not the same in many of these rural cultures, and that I admire greatly. And the women, what I have tried to do is, through the pictures, through the lens of that art, begin to show who they are, and then gradually, the older I've become, I've actually solicited and interviewed over 1,000 women in 14 Indian states to let them tell their stories. So my later books are their stories, not mine. And the photographs simply support that.
That was truly fascinating. Stephen Huyler also has a website where all these things are
It's
very
an unusual website. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would urge you to go and look at that.
It's just stephenhuyler.com.
Yeah. So quickly before we wind up, one last questions. First to Diana, you have spoken a lot. I mean, you have spoken about a lot of things which we don't have time to discuss. So you have spoken about Bollywood cinema, you have spoken about grappling with multilingualism and so many complexities of negotiating with India. So is there any one thing which comes to your mind which you would like to share with the audience?
Well, I have to say, which I haven't said probably in the right, part of the question, that very deep spiritual shattering experience, very positive shattering experience happened to me in Tiruvannamalai, where there were no tickets, and my darshan was like the most exalted one, which I really cherished for a very long time. But the funniest case of multilingualism also happened to me that same night, in the hotel, where the guy gave me the key and sent me saying, "Chinna room upar." And for some reason I knew that Chinna is small in Tamil, and upar is Hindi, and room is of course in English. So in that one sentence, I think is a multilingual, nature of India, which we experience all the time, because of course a lot of people have spoken. We are blessed that we come and we can speak and communicate, but then the people go out of their way to help you. And the kindness you experience might also happen without speaking a word, belonging to different languages. But India is definitely rich in so many linguistic traditions, languages, and I think they really need to be protected and cherished. So what I'm doing now in Delhi, but I keep on learning my Hindi, improving my Hindi, but I also ask my teacher to learn me, some of their, Shuddha Hindi. Sanskritic Hindi, so she laughs at me, she says, because nobody speaks like that, you know. And when I say wo ki baat bahut mahatvapurn hai, this guy's like, oh my God, the last time I heard this word was in school, you know. But I also think that, you know, English being a very convenient medium, languages, especially smaller ones, need to be really well taken care of that, because the richness of everything in art, spiritual expression, is there, you know, and you have to really find and capture that.
Thank you so much. And one last question to you before we open it up. I'm getting a lot of signals from there. If anybody was to write about India or about any culture, what advice would you give, you know, so that they don't fall into this pitfall of cultural appropriation and the sense of privilege, because you have really analyzed yourself so deeply. So how does one approach writing about the culture?
Sorry, I just want to think of that. And this is really actually my slow response is in the sense what I'm saying. I am a writer. I love to write. I love language. I love expressing myself. I always have. But I spent 10 years experiencing India deeply before I wrote a single word that I wanted to publish, even though I knew I wanted to publish. Take the time to be present. Take the time to allow it to mature. Take the time to let it be. I mean, if you want to write daily, that's fine. I don't mean each of us has a different way. I don't mean journaling. But to let it mature and take form. You know, let it kindle like a fire and feed it slowly. Let that happen. And then what you write, you know, so many foreign scholars come to India more than not and just write. They think they have something to say because they see something. And then the mistakes are legion. And they repeat the mistakes because they refer to the things that the last scholar said that was wrong. And then it goes on and on and on and on and on, and it keeps expanding. So that is true for any of us. Just allow your own, trust yourself. Trust. Trust is the big thing, you know. That's why I've been able to do this work. People have trusted me, like Kamala Devi or Rukmini Devi, and then the people they introduced me to. And I took the time to trust them and trust myself to allow it to mature.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to both of you. Thank you. And now we can take some questions from the audience.
Can I ask somebody to take my phone and take a picture of us? Quick. Okay, never mind.
Hi Stephen, hi Ambassador Diana. I have a question to ask you here. I'm Sushi, should get one. Stephen. We see that we as Indians are highly influenced by the Western culture, especially the United States of America. Naturally, we got the Hollywood and all that. And this is a question to both of you, Diana and of course Stephen. Do you see the reverse happening anytime soon, India influencing the Western culture, the United States, the European countries?
The United States has influenced India. Is India now beginning to influence or in a large way? No question about it. India is having a profound effect on world consciousness with the huge, there are two ways. The diaspora of India is gigantic and growing with, for good or bad, Indian wealth pouring out and or being held in other countries and highly motivated people working. So people are now meeting Indians that they converse with. 50 years ago they weren't. Get to know Indians well and are invited to their homes or invite them to their homes. But also the impression that India has, certainly in the IT world, but also, through the work that I do, but not just me, so many of you, your influence, that Indian literary influence on America is, and the West is profound now. Indian authors that are cherished and read in the United States is having a profound effect. And so are films, things are beginning, Bollywood is beginning to affect the United States in many, and not just the US. I don't want to keep taking, please, we don't have much time, so you respond.
I totally agree with you. It's happening in Europe and in Central Europe where I come from. And mind you, we have always been fascinated and attracted to us. India was something we lacked, something that was offering freedom of thought and diversity of thought also. Now it's extremely many people are going and finding themselves in India basically. And but again, what I'm always, because I often speak publicly on India in Lithuania, I'm always inviting people to take a wide view of India, not just follow a guru or one particular dogma, which can easily turn into a dogma, because India has so much to offer. And one of the biggest lessons for me is that there are many ways to truth. This is the truth of the quintessence of Indian thought, philosophy and religion. There are many ways to the same sacred truth. So one must never forget that while appreciating.
Thank you.
The best example is Diwali is being celebrated by the President of America in White House.
Good example.
Hello, Sridhar. So, I have an experience about Stephen. I discovered him through his book in a village 20 years ago in eastern Rajasthan. And then because after publishing his book, he has gone back to that village to give that book to that woman. And that woman just came out with that book to show me, see, you are not the first one to photograph us. There has been some person who came to photograph them and they have published her in that book. So that was my discovery of Stephen. Now my question is this, that being a foreigner, going to remote corners of India, how you make yourself invisible, or how you made yourself invisible in the day when you had a heavy SLR cameras and the camera always make a sound click, click, click. So how was I able to achieve that confidence?
I wear a magic cape, and I put the cape on and I'm gone. No, I can't possibly make myself invisible, but it is the generosity of the people. It's that sense, madame, of truth. It is, of trust. That people, for one thing, I come in often without judgment, and people sense that. I don't come in and you said the same thing, it's how enter a place, how you enter it. And so when I'm in those circumstances, people relax, people let go of their guard, and there's not any reason for them to put it up again. I'm not going to do anything that threatens them. And I would never take a photograph, for example, without first getting to know the people and make them feel at ease. And the same thing with anything, is just to try. It's part of what I said in that question. You asked me, what is the one thing? It's allow yourself to be quiet enough to let the people themselves come forth. One of the things I am most, was the most startling thing for me, madam, when I first, when I was in India, was when I was first in a home and the males of the home, granted, treated me so much like a member of the family that I had one uncle with his arm around me. I had a son who was sort of resting on my leg like this. I had somebody else who was right there. I had the children playing amongst my feet. And I felt, that wouldn't happen in America. Not that sense of intimacy. Not that sense of just, the way that people feel when you are at ease in a family, you are at ease in a family. And to be accepted as a family member is the greatest honor I can think.
Can I add something? I think the foreigner has a choice. We are privileged. We're always treated as a guest, as someone from outside, but also automatically placed on a high podium. It's up to us to get down from the podium.
Oh, thank you.
To me, and that's what you actually said. To me, the best memory of that was when I was waiting for the bus at Nagarjuna Sagar to go back to Hyderabad, and the bus wasn't coming, and everybody was assuring me, "Abhi aayega, aayega, aayega." And then there were women sitting and standing at the, waiting for the same bus, and there were some stones. There was no seating there, but there were stones, and some women placed themselves on the roadside stone. And I was also standing, and after 2 hours you get tired. So one of the women said, "Why don't you sit on the stone?" She gave me her stone to sit, and I sat. And then they all came around and asked, in fact they suggested that I take pictures of them because they became very comfortable with me. And I think that is the approach, that you have to displace yourself from the podium because you don't deserve that podium, and then you blend in.
Wise words. Could be shared by all of us.
My question is to the ambassador. When will your book be available in India, the 3rd edition? All of my India's in English.
That's exactly what I was asking her just now.
Well, now I think I have to because I was never eager to write, and I really appreciate what you said, that your observations and judgments sometimes have to wait to mature. So I've written my book good 10 years after my experiences, but now everybody is asking the same, and since Uma has asked me to translate almost half of my book for her to prepare for to moderate the session, then maybe I should just translate the last portion and look for the publisher.
Please.
Half the job is done, so only the rest is remaining. Yeah. So I think we have to stop now, though even I had lots of questions, and I'm sure there are lots of questions in the audience. So thank you so much, Ambassador Diana, for it. Okay, one last. Do we have the time? Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, as you were talking about, you felt safe here rather than in Delhi. So I just want to know that how you compare your safety at your country and at India. Like, how would you compare women's safety in your country and India?
Well, it's very difficult to say because I was 25, I was a young woman traveling solo, and now I no longer have these privileges, so I no longer experience that, and I am now in a bit of a privileged situation, this capital city diplomatic circles and all that. But I think much has happened and changed already, and the second thing, it's just very important, and many Indians are talking about that the woman is not a property, she has a right to a street life and feel safe. So this is a very common challenge and plight, and it's a work in progress, I guess. So I won't judge about today because I just don't know anymore.
You are talking to a diplomat, right? You're aware of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Uma. Excellent. Thank you, Diana.
Wonderful session, and thank you, wonderful audience. Yes.
Thank you, Stephen and Diana. This was a lovely section, and thank you for sharing your experiences. As a young girl, after listening to both of you here speak, I feel like I want to visit Lithuania. And to our audience, one of the starting points could be the exhibitions on my right. There are two exhibitions. One is about the capital of Lithuania, the city Vilnius, and this year is the 700th anniversary of the city. So we have all the historical photos of the city, and another exhibition by our friend here, Elgin, and this exhibition is titled Water Music. I think Lithuania being our guest nation, we should all, listen to aspects of their culture, see and experience what their culture and nation is about. So I urge all of the audience members to later visit the exhibitions to my right here. And thank you so much for this session, ma'am.